So, Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel came out at least a week ago as of making this video, and there's a few things that need to be said. And I already know what you guys are thinking from the title, and I already know that a majority of you will have already tuned out, left some bad comments, or have disliked the video and everything else on my channel. And look, I'm here to explain to you how it's true, but it's not. Let me explain. Now, for those of you who, for whatever reason, don't know what Master Duel is and decided to click on this video anyway, Master Duel is basically the newest Yu-Gi-Oh! Simulator that has come out recently and has hit so many strides because it is free to play with a really friendly model, for the most part, to be honest, and has started causing a bit of controversy, I guess you could say, in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community, if you could call it that. But before we get into that, I feel I should probably explain why I think I'm qualified to talk onto the subject. First off, I've been playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Casually since about 2007 and really started to get into it towards the end of the Synchro era, going into the XZ's era. And I finally started taking the game competitively around 2013 to 2014 and stopped playing the game competitively around 2019. And until this game came out, I really haven't played Yu-Gi-Oh! Since, so I'm not really coming at this necessarily from a Duel Monsters OG player who's been there since like day one, but someone who really got into the game during the latter half of GX and started taking the game seriously later on in their career. So I think I've kind of gotten the feel for all real quote-unquote formats of the game for the most part, and I think I'm really qualified to say my 2 cents on this subject. The huge divide that is currently occurring in the Master Duel community really has to do with the state of modern players who have kept up with the game or have followed it competitively relatively versus those who picked up and dropped the game in the Duel Monsters era for the most part, coming back into the madness that is the modern game of Yu-Gi-Oh! The first thing that needs to be said is, this divide has always existed. This is not something that is new. It existed going as far back as the XZ's era. You can even go back even farther to see there were players who completely cut themselves off during the Synchro era, the GX era, and the Duel Monsters era. I specifically remember that this would be a thing because whenever I would log onto Dueling Network, yes, I am that old, there would be rooms dedicated to playing in these areas, and there would be some people who were nicer about these eras than others, and this divide actually, in my opinion, reached a peak with the start of the Pendulum era, with that mechanic and the new rules associated with it being that a huge turning point. This was unlike anything else. Usually every other summoning mechanic was added in through the extra deck, but Pendulums not only created an entirely new card type, but created an entirely new, how should I say this, interaction. Now, most of those monsters that were level 7 and higher, you could potentially Pendulum summon them easily, and it was absolutely insane. I remember some of the original strategies that came off of this. Gate Guardian Pendulums, Mist Valley Pendulums, things like that were absolutely insane. Well, at the time they were released anyway. But the thing is, this was not a real unique point, as, once again, it happened at the start of the Link era, and I bet you the same thing will occur again the next time a new mechanic becomes introduced. Point being is that all of these eras introduced something new that either caused players to leave the game or stay in it, and this is something that has always been consistent and has always happened and is not exclusive to things like Link's Pendulums or XZ's. This has always been happening, and it's been a huge shakeup not only to veterans but new players as well, as every single time something new comes out, nobody knows what the hell is happening. I remember it took a long time just for people to figure out how XZ's monsters work and how detaching material to the graveyard worked with certain card effects like Sangan. And it's things like that that really kind of confuse some of the quote-unquote old/new players, where they're coming back into the game for the first time and they're seeing all this stuff work and they have no idea what the hell is happening. And honestly, I can agree with that. I remember the first time I saw Pendulum Summoning, because at the time I had not really followed the game's news cycle to like a T, so the second I saw someone set these brand new cards in a Pendulum scale and then proceed to special summon up to like 3 monsters completely blew my mind, and I honestly thought that someone had hacked Dueling Network in order to get these new cards. And at the time I was thinking, how could they allow this into the game? And like, really, it just allowed so much ridiculous and dumb stuff, and really things like Pendulums, Links, XZs really proceeded to speed up the game. But this is where the first criticism is, and that's the game is too fast and doesn't allow your opponent to play. But has this ever been really a thing? I mean, when you think about it, is the game really as bad as these, I'll call them Yugi-Boomers. It's not really the nicest term, but it's the only thing that can really describe them. But has this really never been a thing? The whole entire idea of the game being focused on not allowing your opponent to win the game, killing your opponent in one turn, or taking an eternity to end your turn. Are all these modern concepts, or have they existed throughout the entire game's lifespan? Well, I'm here to tell you they have always, and I mean always, have been a constant variable throughout this game's lifespan. And in fact, the earliest example of this that I can think of is things that happened in year 2 of the game's life cycle. Most notably, the first deck, in my opinion, to really do something this big was called the Yada Lock in 2004, mainly comprising of the cards Yata-Garatsu, Chaos Emperor Dragon, Envoy of the End, and Sangan. Basically, what you end up doing is summon Sangan, then special summon Envoy of the End to board wipe and discard all the cards in your opponent's hand. Then use Sangan's effect from being blown up to summon Yata, and then attack the opponent, preventing them from drawing. And at that point, it's pretty much... Hey guys, so I kinda messed up here in saying that you're supposed to summon Sangan or Witch of the Black Forest first, but that wouldn't work technically since you already normal summoned that turn, therefore you couldn't summon Yata-Garatsu again when you added it to your hand. So, kind of messed up the combo there, because the whole entire thing is that Sangan or Witch of the Black Forest is supposed to be on the field before you are using your normal summon for that turn, because the way it's supposed to go, you summon, or you have Sangan or Witch of the Black Forest onto the field, then you use Chaos Emperor's Dragons to blow up the entire field and the hands, and then it's off that search you get from those destroyed cards that you get Yata-Garatsu to your hand, and then you normal summon him and attack for the combo in order to go off. I kind of messed that up, and I really wanted to make that clear because for whatever reason in my head, I thought that Sangan special summoned the monster instead of just adding it to your hand. I probably was confusing it for like Mystic Tomato or something. But anyway, that errata aside, getting back to the video. As in those times, there really wasn't much graveyard or floating effects to like save you in these situations, and Yata's effect would stop you from drawing anything that would get you out of that situation. And in fact, the lock was so volatile that in some of the Yu-Gi-Oh games, the AI is actually programmed to surrender upon the lock going through. And this lock was so potent that not only did this result in most of the cards in this combo being limited and for the first time in the game's history banned. Yes, some of these cards were some of the fucking first cards to ever get banned. But Yata-Garatsu is still on the ban list to this day in 2022, and Envoy of the End only got off the ban list because its effect got severely nerfed in an errata, making it so that way you couldn't activate any other card effects for the rest of the turn. And the thing is, this wouldn't be the last time something like this happened. I mean, hell, during the same time, things like Catapult Turtle, FTK, and Burn decks in general were attempting to do similar things in terms of not letting your opponent play the game and trying to kill you the first second they get. And this isn't the first or last time this would happen in the game's history. Clearly, as we have seen, many other Tier 0 decks completely wreck the meta, such as Teledad, Dragon Rulers, Spellbooks, and things like Spirals. The only reason I pointed out Yata specifically is because the idea that the game really hasn't been a mess of people trying to figure out how to play the game without the opponent doing anything has always just been a constant in the game, even going as far back as Duel Monsters. And honestly, by the end of the GX era, the game slowly started to transform into what we know as the modern day, with multiple special summons and effect negations being put on board. And it would peak during the beginning of the League era with cards like Firewall Dragon and the Nightmare archetype, which, by the way, the amount of things that Firewall and the Nightmares did is it's dumb. There's a reason why Firewall Dragon got banned, and I'm happy that it did, because holy shit, the amount of combos I saw pop off with that thing were just so degenerate. However, I can hear you already saying, but Doc, you really can't compare the speed and lockdown of a deck like Yata-Garatsu to something like full-powered Zodiac or Spiral Links. And you're right, you really can't. I mean, hell, if Yatagarasu was let off the ban list today, it wouldn't really be a danger to anyone, and would only pop off if you, like, never drew into a hand trap on the first turn. But it really wasn't my purpose, dude. What I wanted to establish that this has always been an aspect of the game, and the most important part is that I wanted to establish that I'm pretty confident casual players didn't even know about the Yata Lock or Catapult Turtle FTK, which leads me to the main reason of this video and the reasoning behind the title of why these old-timers coming back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Hate the current state of the game, and that's the fact that they really never played the game properly, or at least they didn't play it in a way that was relevant to the big game itself. You see, a lot of what makes Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! Really isn't focused on casual play, and that's really become evident if you've looked at any booster set that's come out ever. And I mean, literally day one, like, tournament packs have completely revolutionized how the game is played, and you can go check out Swag Kage's video on the history of Yu-Gi-Oh! For that more in-depth facts on that. That's really helped me research this video, but you can really see that the push of these packs have always been that some select cards are always going to be better than others, and this was clearly meant for a competitive play type of thing, rather than the playground thing that we're all used to, and that's really what pushes a lot of these booster packs and cards. That's why people buy them. You don't buy it so that way you can go, oh, would you look at this? I have a brand new common that I can just splash into any one of my decks. No, you go into it specifically looking for certain cards to either build the deck or to enhance your deck. Most oftentimes these cards are going to be secret rares or ultimate rares in some cases of the older packs, and things like that have always been consistent throughout the franchise's history. It's just that we have grown. I wouldn't say it's grown, I would say we have just mainly have changed the way packs work, as, for example, super rares are now guaranteed in each pack when they previously weren't. Things like that have always helped the game evolve, basically. Especially in the competitive manner, as I was just saying. And this clearly shows a lot in the critics and Steam reviews that I see launched at the game. Granted, some of these are justified, such as the need for a casual mode, a proper private lobby system, and general improvements towards how decks are made and the gem distribution. But a majority of them come from the idea that the game is not new player friendly, which, in all honesty, is not true at all, to a certain degree. And by this, unlike what the Steam reviews would have you believe, the game just doesn't just throw you out into the wolves where you're gonna be there in the freezing winter cold without no coat, no survival things, and there's a dozen dire wolves around you. No, that is not how the game throws you into. There's entire solo campaigns that not only load up your account with gems, but also introduce you to multiple new playstyles, multiple different types of decks, both old and new, not to mention includes some old meta decks. There's a lot of decks that were featured in the solo mode that at one point or another were meta, and for the most part they give you a lot of the good cards for you to run those decks with. And this is not mentioning that they also give you structure decks, which gives you potentially good cards that you'll need for other decks, or if you want to build that deck specifically, it's a good basis for building that deck. Adding on to that, they literally hold your hand as they teach you how each deck works, give you proper challenges in some areas that require you to think really hard in order to beat the AI. Speaking of which, the AI in this game is absolutely fantastic and will wreck you if you are not careful. Not to mention, in all truthfulness, the AI is actually scarier than most gold players I've run into in terms of the plays it does sometimes. Not to mention, the game doesn't even force you to do ranked placements. It starts you off at the absolute bottom of the ranked ladder and gives you every chance to expand your knowledge and to grow as a player. In all honesty, it feels like the game is too handholdy sometimes. I mean, hell, this isn't even accounting for how they monetized the game, because they basically allowed you to have 3 staple cards for free with the booster packs, which give you Ash Blossom, Solemn Judgment, and Lightning Storm. 3 cards of which are so goddamn good. Not to mention, they give you cards like Monster Reborn and Regeki for free. Literally nothing, and they just give them to you. It is absolutely insane how set up they are basically trying to make the player. But then with all these tutorials, early game boosts to players, and free-to-play model that is for the most part friendly in the early game, why is it that people are still angry about not understanding the modern game and feel like they are getting absolutely wrecked at every corner? Well, I brought it up earlier. These guys likely never played the game in a competitive manner, and they were mainly used to playground Yu-Gi-Oh! The type of decks that were built only from booster packs and the occasional structure deck. The type that you have to beg your parents for in order to get more cards. The thing that you have to get tins and bada bing bada boom. Oh, would you look at that? I have rare cards that no one else has because I bought a tin and got a bunch of good staples. Things like that. These type of decks were inconsistent, to say the least. If nobody had consistency, then of course the game felt slow to what is now. And I know that because it is my personal experience. You see, back in middle school when I was really getting into the game, it really did feel like everyone I was dueling was on an equal playing ground, and it really felt like anybody could win any duel, and like everyone I knew had an ace monster that nobody else would have, either due to its rarity or because that's the card they really liked. I know for me personally, it was cards like Dark Sigmor and Elemental Hero Absolute Zero, and friends cards like Endless Decay, Thousand Eyes Dragon, Crab Turtle. Specifically with Crab Turtle, as with that card, it was one of my best Yu-Gi-Oh memories ever that came from that card. You see, there was a person who was a grade above me who was slowly starting to lose interest in the game and was about to quit dueling, so I kinda challenged him to one last duel, and on the field was his signature card, Crab Turtle, and to make sure I gave him one hell of a final duel, I made sure to summon out my sacred beast Uriah to finish him off, and in return he actually ended up giving me his deck with his signature card included and thanked me for one good final experience. And it was that moment where I kind of felt like it was like anime, basically, whereas I was getting the torch passed on to me with this Crab Turtle, and honestly, that card felt really special to me and was one of probably my most played cards in middle school. I really treasured that card because of that moment I had with that one person. And it's things like that that are what compromised up Playground Yu-Gi-Oh! And really, it felt so great. That was until one day, let's just call my friend Endless Decay, showed up with a new deck that he was eager to show off, claiming he would beat everyone. And he did. And I just heard constantly about this deck, and he kept warning me, I'm going to beat your ass with this deck. And so I'm just awaiting, and just waiting for the free period to come up so that way I can finally challenge this deck and see what all the fuss was about. And he beat my ass with ease, just like he said when I was finally able to duel him in that free period. The deck he used? It was at the time the brand new Dark World structure deck, and it not only wiped the field with me, but trashed on every strategy and every trick that I had up my sleeve. It barely gave me the chance to do anything, and nothing I ever did had me stand a chance against that deck. This was the power of a good, consistent, and organized deck, and mine never stood a chance. This action eventually led to a arms race of sorts, where a majority of people would end up buying structure decks like the Lost Sanctuary and Dragoonity Legion, as for me, I ended up getting the Realm of the Sea Emperor deck. And this was an action that led me to thinking harder about making strategies and making separate decks, which eventually put me onto the path of competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! And after that, the game was never really the same. It really kind of just evolved into who can bring out their signature card first without getting destroyed. And things like that kind of, as I mentioned, led me to competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! As it was like, oh, let me get this card out as consistently as I can before my opponent so that way I can set up without having to deal with any bullshit. Sound familiar? It should, because that's pretty much what the game is at that level. And, of course, this is just my story, but the likelihood is that this is how a lot of the old players feel getting in. They want to hop in with the old decks that they know and love and maybe get a taste of those good old days. And I get that. And when I eventually went back to play with that friend years later with that Dark World player, I brought along my competitive Blue Eyes deck at the time, and he faced me with that same Dark World deck. And upon facing it again, I realized how bad of a player I really was and how bad the deck was in comparison to this modern deck I brought against it. Point being, time passes fast in Yu-Gi-Oh! And unless we update, we really don't stand a chance against newer things. And I really think that this is what those old players coming back are struggling with. They're angry and they're lost. They don't know what to do. The cards that they've known their entire lives aren't doing shit against things like Eldritch or Sky Strikers, and they basically want to play the game the way they left it, but the game they left behind changed drastically, for the better or for the worst, and without any guide to push them or show them the right way, they'll probably just quit. And in fact, that's probably what a majority of players have already done, with the fact that the game has been out for a while at this point. And it certainly doesn't help that the game does not have a casual queue, and while I get that won't entirely solve the problem, mainly because where else are people going to test their decks or warm up before rank, it will help. And the thing is, Konami isn't exactly helping this problem either, with the fact that, for example, take a look at decks like Dark Magician in Blue Eyes, for example. A lot, and I mean a lot, of the deck requires a lot of super rares and ultra rares, not including the staple cards you will likely need to splash into those decks to make them viable. Basically baiting the player into just absolutely throwing out lots of money just so that way they can relive the nostalgia with these decks. And the thing is, it won't work either, because unfortunately, for the most part, Blue Eyes and Dark Magician just don't really stand a chance in the modern day. They used to be able to. I remember when I was playing that there was like Dark Magician and Blue Eyes Chaos Max that would be rogue decks. They wouldn't exactly completely win out the tournament, but they would still succeed and at least be consistent. But nowadays they just really aren't, and so when these players end up either spending money or spend a lot of time grinding out to get their Dark Magician or their Blue Eyes decks maxed out to be like the YouTube video they watched, they'll find it's not exactly perfect. And honestly, that's what I've noticed a lot in Gold. You'll see people with these big ass, well, not big ass, but they clearly put a lot of time into trying to grind out and make their decks consistent, but it doesn't work. Take, for example, my friend Frog, who, if you guys don't know who he is, be sure to check out the Frogcast channel, recently went up against a Dark Magician player. Now, if you don't know, Dark Magicians are really, and I mean really heavily reliant on their first search going out, as they really need to set that up and also set up Eternal Soul at the same time, so that way they can freely summon all the Dark Magician cards in their hand that are making it brick. But my friend Frog, although he was running a Toon deck, was able to easily, and I mean easily, disrupt the hell out of the Dark Magician deck to the point where by the time Eternal Soul became active, it was just one simple click and boom, all the hard work that the Dark Magician player had done to set that up instantly went away. And it's repeatedly coming with Blue Eyes, for example, as my friend, once again, Frog, well, he was running Frog decks, easily outwit a Blue Eyes deck because he just had that many negates on board. And I personally have experience destroying Blue Eyes decks with my Photon deck in early Gold, because all I had to do was just negate the effect of the Maiden that they've set on the field without even thinking, what happens if this guy's effect gets negated? And it's things like that that easily result into these players becoming jaded and absolutely hating the game, because these decks that they grew up and they loved with absolutely get crushed under major scrutiny behind other cards. And it's kind of sad, because I can relate to that. But that's not to say all hope is lost, as honestly, I don't think we should gatekeep these people. I think rather than just saying things like, get good, or if you don't like it, don't play it, we should do our best to help these poor souls in this brand new game space, as from what I've seen, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is much more accessible than it has ever been, and it makes me so happy, because as like someone who really enjoys the game, it really brings me joy to see so many people being able to hop into the game and play it as well. So, being a man of my word, here's some advice for some newer Master Duel players. Number 1, as I said before, do not start off with Blue Eyes or Dark Magician as your first deck. These decks are so goddamn expensive and don't justify the return in price, especially Dark Magician. Blue Eyes at least has Chaos Max Dragon, but Dark Magician really, and I mean really, doesn't have anything going for it. Regardless, both decks are really big with bricking hard, and it really doesn't help that unless you spend a lot of IRL dollars and gems, you're going to have a lot of massive trouble getting the cards you need. Number 2, attempt to 100% all solo missions, or at least complete 50% of them, and I mean complete 50% of them. Solo missions not only give you free starter decks, free cards, free cosmetics, and free gems, and most importantly, they give you more experience. You're missing out on so much stuff by not doing a majority of the solo play. Number 3, don't be afraid to look up guides on the game and look up videos on how things work. The internet is there. Use it. There's literally no excuse, and by doing so, you're already ahead of most players, as by simply looking something up shows how dedicated you actually are, and most players who don't want to stick around won't do that, so it'll pretty much give you an advantage. It's basically the more you know is what's going to help you win the games. Number 4, have fun with friends. Literally everything's better with friends. Get friends into this. Like I said, it's really beginner friendly and sets you up really nicely in the early game with lots of gens and free items. So you'll pretty much be set. And finally, number 5, if you don't like the game, literally just play Duel Links. Okay, that last one was a joke, but yeah, no, seriously, just go play Duel Links. I think it's a much slower game, and although it's not really beginner player friendly, if you want a slow game, that's what Duel Links is pretty much for. It's pretty much just anime the game. But yeah, that's it for me, guys, and once again, everything that I say here is derived from my own personal experience, my own thoughts, and my own opinions, so it's not exactly going to 100% vibe with everyone, and basically just, take into account that this is my opinion, and I'm only here trying to help and explain this to you guys, so that way you can have a better understanding of everything in the game so far. So with all that said, feel free to leave a comment down in the description if you disagree with me. Let's start up a conversation. And yeah, we'll see where we go next time. I don't know if I'm going to do more content for Master Duel in general. This is just something that I saw and that I really wanted to address in the like a video format. This actually went much longer than I thought it would. But until next time, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.